Welcome everybody to the 7th and final merge community call. Let's see what's happened since the last one, quite a bit. Bellatrix obviously happened on the 6th, and that's basically the final thing we were waiting on before a mainnet merge. Tim, is there anything major? Why don't you just start and I will make sure this link is right in all the places.
Sure. Yeah, so good morning or afternoon, everyone. Yeah, like Trent was saying, this is going to be the last of these community calls, hopefully, unless something went pretty bad with the merge. But yeah, I think we're safe that this is the last one. I guess there's two things that I think are worth highlighting today. The first is that yes, we had Bellatrix go live yesterday, and we'll have the actual transition happen sometime next week. In order to track that, there's a bunch of different websites. I've personally been using Bordel.wtf to track it. So because we use a TTD value, we can't have a specific time for when the merge happens, but it's roughly looking like it'll be late UTC on Wednesday. Since first announcing kind of the actual TTD and merge releases, a lot of the execution layer client teams have put out new releases that either fix some bugs or have just some suggested improvements. So if you are running a node, it's worth having one more look at the blog post and seeing if you're on the latest version of your client. And if not, you can kind of look at the release notes on the client you're using and determine whether you want to upgrade. So this is mostly for the consensus, mostly for the execution layer clients. So yes, please have a look at the post at the post itself and kind of make that call. And then thirdly, this morning, literally minutes before this call, we put out another blog post about the testnet shutdown. So several months ago, we announced that Kiln, Ropsten, and Rinkeby are deprecated with the merge. Kiln was scheduled to be shut down when the merge happens, and so this is what will happen. So sometime next week, that testnet will be shut down. Obviously, it's kind of impossible to like fully shut down a testnet. Anyone can still run a node on it if they want. So by shutdown, what we mean is kind of the nodes, the boot nodes run by client and testing teams will be turned off, and then infrastructure providers will likely stop supporting that network as well. So you can still run a node, but it might be much harder. And if you're an application or user who just wants a testnet to use that's a smooth experience, that probably won't be the case on those. So Kiln is going to be sunset next week, and then Ropsten is scheduled to be shut down by the end of this year, and Rinkeby sometime in the first half of next year. That said, we've heard already from like several infrastructure providers that they're going to stop supporting or kind of gracefully shut down support for Ropsten and Rinkeby. So that might also mean just less functionality and stuff like that. So if you're using any of Kiln, Ropsten, and Rinkeby, I highly suggest you move to Gordy or Sepolia. Those two are very much intended to be supported long into the future. And hello to all the MCon people trickling in. It's pretty neat to see the room there slowly filling up. Hey, yeah. So those were the three things I had. Oh, and yeah, I guess actually one last quick last one. If you do want to watch the merge happen, EatStaker, Bankless, Cat Herders, and a bunch of others are organizing a community call live stream when the merge is happening. I believe this will be streamed on the Ethereum Foundation YouTube, but they're all the ones kind of hosting this and facilitating this. So I'll try and pull up the link after, but yes, if you want to watch it happen, that's probably going to be the main place. Yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah, there's nothing else that comes to mind. Oh, thanks, Pooja, for the link.
Yeah, Pooja's link is the live stream. But yeah, Bordel to know the time. double check your EL client versions. If you're using Kiln, Ropsten, Rinkeby, it's a time to move away. And if you want to watch live stream, the link that Pooja shared is the right one.
So yeah, this is the time for any questions. And if we need to stall while people type them out, happy to make space for client teams or researchers if they want to mention anything specific we may have forgotten or anything new that's come up recently. So if you're a client team or someone who would like to make a comment from the research side of things, just raise your hand and we can unmute you. Talk about the latest shadow fork, please. Yeah, I think it went off without a hitch. There weren't any issues. If Perry's here, he's welcome to give a summary.
I don't think Perry is here.
Yeah, I don't think there was much beyond that other than it went well. Which is, it's a good thing to hear.
Yep.
It's seeming like this might be a pretty short call. Again, if people have questions, just put them in the chat. We're not going to be talking this entire time. So we're happy to answer questions if they materialize, but we're not going to sit here for an hour if nobody has any questions or anything.
Oh, is someone from MCon going to ask a question? Or are they just messing with the...
Is anyone scared?
I'm not scared.
No.
Yeah, and I'll say, it's very possible that we see some minor issues when the merge happens. Like, we saw in Bellatrix, there was like a short drop in participation rates. I think we expect those things to happen, and we'll deal with them as they come. And yeah, like the way Ethereum is designed, like it's made to operate in very imperfect conditions, and so I think we don't need 100% of nodes to update exactly perfectly for this to work. Obviously, we want to get as high as we can. But if we see, and I suspect we'll see some minor issues on the day of, myself and others will kind of chase those down and make sure they get fixed. But yeah, like we did on Bellatrix, and Bellatrix is basically back to the like we did on the Beacon chain, and the Beacon chain is basically like the pre-Bellatrix levels of attestations and participation. So yeah, I'm feeling good.
Yeah, I'll also share, given we have a little bit of extra space here, check out that link I just put in the chat. It's a compilation of a bunch of responses from core devs, including their summary of their feelings leading up to the merge, and you can find out if people are scared in those comments.
Okay, so there's a good question about exchanges and mining pools and whatnot, and like ensuring user safety during the merge. And so for mining pools, it's obviously like a bit different because like I'm not a mining pool operator, but I suspect what I would do if I was one is something like you want to mine all the way up to the last block and distribute those rewards. There is like some potential for reorg on the last proof of work block until the proof of stake chain has finalized. So that might require like some just monitoring on the order of minutes. And as I understand it, like mining pools don't send out payouts instantly. They usually like bundle them and whatnot. So I think if you're a mining pool, mining all the way up to like the last proof of work block, making sure that like the chain has finalized and has come to consensus on that last proof of work block before sending out your rewards is a smart thing to do. Similarly for an exchange, exchanges do this every network upgrade, but they typically pause withdrawals and deposits just to make sure that the chain has settled. So if, again, I was operating an exchange, I would do this, shortly before the merge up to the point where it's finalized on the other side, and you see that the chain is stable. Beyond that, you know, there's nothing that like mining pools or exchanges should have to do, except that's different than what they do in any other network upgrade, which is, you know, upgrade their nodes, monitor the chain stability, and once everything is kind of clear, then they can reopen deposits and withdrawals. But yeah, during that time, there might, you know, if any issue come up, you'd much rather have deposits and withdrawals halted. And then for non-censoring MEV boost relays, there's an answer in the chat around blocks route. Manifold as well said they were working on one, but it's unclear if it's released yet. And there's some links in the chat there. Risks if the hash rate starts to go down. If the hash rate starts to go down, so basically, if it goes down a little bit, not much happens. You know, the merge just happens later than expected. We reached the terminal total difficulty later. Over the past handful of days, it's actually gone up a bit. So, but it might go down in the next couple of days. You know, so if we reach the merge on like the 17th rather than the 14th, we'll do nothing. We'll just wait an extra 3 days. If there was a world where, say, for whatever reason, 50% of the hash rate drops overnight, which is very unlikely, or, you know, it's just like 10% a day over the next week or something like that. And it just makes it that instead of reaching TTD on like the 15th or 17th, we're like, you know, say a month out. Then we could coordinate a TTD override, which is like we did on some of the test nets, where we just choose a lower TTD value and put out new client releases with it. And that coordination, you know, choosing the value, putting out the releases, getting everyone to upgrade usually takes at least like a week. So it's not worth doing if the hash rate is not dropped enough to delay things by over a week. But if we saw that it's dropped enough to delay things by, say, a month, especially in a case where like it dropped below like 50% or something, and there's maybe these weird scenarios where there could be like a 51% attack if that hash rate came back online, client teams would probably decide to just change the TTD and do an override. But it's not looking like that's going to happen. Mika, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just at this point, in order for us to be delayed by a month, the hash rate would have to drop by like 90% or something. Not 50%.
Right. Yeah.
Like it would be very, very significant now, and the closer we get to that date, the more it has to drop. So like tomorrow, it'll have to drop 95% or something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Given that we're like 5 days away or something, it would have to drop a ton. Do you think there will be a big fight to Infura by users running their own EL? I don't see why. So basically, Infura does not support the Engine API. So that means that if you use Infura post-merge as your EL, you won't be able to produce a block and to verify blocks that are being produced by the networks. So it would be kind of strictly worse in terms of like potential rewards. Obviously, it might be lower cost to do that, but it's not something Infura has like mentioned to us. They've also like done a ton of education towards their users over the past couple months, trying to explain to them why people need to run their own EL now. Oh yeah, okay. It seems like I misunderstood the question. What was the question?
Yeah, I believe the question is it is now significantly more expensive to run an Ethereum client than it was.
Yes.
After the merge. Sorry, after the merge, it's much more expensive to run.
So you mean non-validators?
Yeah, not validators, regular node operators. It will become much more expensive, and the reason for this is twofold. One, you have to run 2 clients, so it's more operationally complex.
Yep.
But 2, you need to retain receipt history and I believe block header history and maybe block body history. I don't know on that one. Whereas previously you could run like a number of the different clients allowed you to prune history in order to save space. So you could run it on like 150 gigabytes of disk.
Right.
Now you need like 600 or 700 gigabytes for I think the smallest node requires like 600 gigabytes now.
Okay.
And so there are a number of people who previously could run a node and now cannot run a node. And so there's discussion on maybe trying to fix this, but there's no ETA on fixing it. But yeah, I personally do suspect that there will be some number of users. I've seen people frustrated with the change and some people giving up on running nodes because of this.
Yeah. So I think so the short answer is of course, if the requirements increase, less people will run the nodes. And the question is by how much? I think, client teams are working on ways to optimize that. I know, the Get team, and I believe a while back, Aragon was working on a way to run, a Beacon client in parallel. And I know that the CL teams have worked on ways to optimize the storage as well. So I suspect over time, the overhead of running both is something that we'll work on minimizing, but for sure in the meantime, if there's more overhead, then it means less people might be able to run this. And so they might use something like Infer or Alchemy, unfortunately, yeah. Okay, next one was, has the difficulty bomb some side effect? So I'm not sure I understand the question, but basically, the difficulty bomb is probably starting to go off right around now. I haven't looked at it super closely myself, but it's very much in the early stages. So, there's probably some minimal effect. And I don't know if it's showing up in block times yet, but it might show up in, say, mining rewards. Every 100,000 blocks, it increases. And the merge, I suspect, is going to happen. Last I checked, it was something like 40,000 blocks at the current difficulty. So wherever the difficulty bomb is kind of at now, it's likely that it won't go more than one extra period beyond this before we transition to proof of stake. So there is some minimal effect. It might grow a little bit more, but we're not in a spot where the difficulty bombs impact in the next week or two will make a difference to things. Yeah. Okay, so there's some discussion in the chat. There's some questions in the chat about basically this history storage and whatnot. A question about what's the lightest weight non-validating home node setup. I don't have the exact answer here. I don't know if someone on the call has an answer. Oh, I see Perry's joined on the call. Perry, I feel like you might have a feel for that. Oh, okay, sorry, I've unmuted you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, could you just repeat the question again?
If you have a feeling for what is the lightest weight non-validating node you can run if you're optimizing for this space, basically.
I think either Nethermind and Nimbus should be a good combination in that scenario. I remember talking to Marek about it at some point, and I think the difference isn't that much with Geth, but you're still going to save a couple gigabytes.
Do you have a ballpark numbers or not off the top of your head?
Let me try and find that. I can just post them in chat in a few minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks.
We had some people also ask about the latest shadow fork. Other than saying it went well, do you have anything to add there, Barry?
Yes, I think. Yeah. So yeah, it did go well. The only issues we saw was with one Teku Aragon node, but that was my mistake. I didn't clean the machine properly earlier, so it had some stale data. And Aragon basically thought it was on the old shadow fork rather than the new one, whereas the Beacon node thought it was on the new one, and it just was unhealthy. Besides that, we're just looking into some MEV relay behavior just to make sure that everything is working as expected. But that's the only open topic right now, I think. Yeah, otherwise all clients went through a transition as expected.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fred has a question. What's the best public dashboard to follow during the merge? So I think unless you're monitoring your own nodes, the first thing you probably Beacon Chain has a bunch of charts. They usually lag a little bit, unfortunately, but I think that's probably the best public one. On the live stream, I suspect people will be sharing their screens and looking at like more granular monitoring as well. So the live stream we mentioned earlier will probably have some better or like more recent data. And basically, I think that the first thing you were looking at is like, does the network finalize on the other side? And that basically tells us, over 2/3 of the validators agreed on the merge block and the transition, and we're kind of chugging along. And that's a very low bar for success. I think the second thing we look at is participation rate. So it's like, between 2/3 and 100%, how many validators are still doing all their duties. And I think from that, there's a bunch of other kind of secondary metrics we'll start looking at. One I'm particularly curious to see myself is like fee recipients. Are there cases where we can tell that like large validator sets have not or misset their fee recipient? I think from there it becomes it becomes much more cases where like the network is going along, we haven't lost any throughput and whatnot, and it's more about like, are there specific operators that are having issues, or do we see we might see some issue with a specific client combo and trying to triangulate those. But yeah, Beacon Chain has some good dashboards that'll give you this high level information. If you run monitoring on your node, you get a bunch of other kind of health data and just stability data, and yeah, I think on the live stream we'll be sharing some more stuff as well. Do we plan to post subtitles for this meeting later? Where if yes, if by subtitles, I think YouTube does the closed captions automatically after the live stream is over. I don't know if we do notes for these meetings, if we do full transcripts. I think.
Yeah, I don't think we do.
Yeah. Oh, we do. Pooja says we do. So there'll be a full transcript as well. Usually the transcripts lag by a couple of days. So if you want to get the info before the merge, I recommend in this case actually watching the recording, because you might get the transcripts like next Monday, which might be like 24 hours or something before the merge. Any other questions? And Perry is posting all of the size of the different client teams in the chat right here.
Yeah, if there's nothing else. Oh, here we go.
How many validators do you think will run LBV boost after the merge? I don't know. I know some staking pools have made commitments to run specific specific MEV instances, and so I suspect there'll probably be a couple of the larger chunks of validators that end up running it, but I don't know for all the staking pools. I don't have a view and say what exchanges will do, and it's hard to predict what the long tail of home stakers and solo stakers will do as well. I don't know if anyone thinks they have a better estimate. Oh, I see there's a Chris here, but I don't know if that's Chris from the Flashbots team, or if so, please post in the chat and I'll unmute you. Okay, there's a question about running a validator node on the Raspberry Pi. I don't know, Perry, if you want to answer this. Oh, sorry, I muted you again.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, so you can run a validating node on Raspberry Pi. We have there's a Twitter page, Ethereum on ARM. So they prepare images which have the clients built in them, and I think they even have a couple of guides on how you can get validators running on Raspberry Pis. They have taken part in Shadow Forks in the past, and everything's worked quite okay. I think the only thing they recommend is that you don't run too many validators, but if you just have a handful, it should be fine. And they were testing a different board, Rock something, if I'm not wrong. It's supposed to be a lot more powerful of a board compared to Raspberry Pi, and it had some different architecture that allowed you to have better SSDs connected to them. I don't know, there were like a lot of advantages to using that one. So talk to them. They should be the best people to help with this. Yeah, I see something in chat, Rock Pi, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Eat Powell question. I don't have a strong, I guess, the only strong opinion I have about these is that if you're a user, you should try and figure out whether like the chain you're interacting us is safe in a way, and like there's many ways you can look at that, and there's many things that people forking Ethereum can do in order to make things safer. And basically, one of the very obvious ones is just like replay protection. Like if you make a transaction on a chain, you want it to ideally not be able to be replayed on another network, so that the transaction, you're only making one transaction when you think you're making one transaction. To me personally, that's like the very minimal bar of like safety. And some of these chains, like these potential forks, have not done this like very basic technical thing. So my thoughts on it is like none of these forks have released software that's at the very minimum bar of secure for users. Doesn't mean that they can't do it, doesn't mean that like they're not free to fork the network. But yeah, that's my rough feeling, is like so far everything we've seen from them has been like very subpar in terms of quality. I personally would not like trust my funds on any of those chains. And unless you're like very comfortable with what you're doing, trying to say like make transactions on one chain and to say like sell your ETH POW to something else at the risk of potentially getting replayed on mainnet might not be worth it. So yeah, that's the main thing I would say. It's just like, be sure that like the chain you're interacting with is safe, and that it doesn't put your funds on the Ethereum mainnet at risk by doing so. But yeah, like Micah said, people are free to fork the network if they want. Yeah. I can try to unmute. I've asked to unmute MCon, but I think somebody's gonna have to like, accept. Oh, hey.
We just want to say thank you.
Thanks a lot. This is awesome. Hope you're having a good conference. Any other questions? Because otherwise this feels like the highest point at which we can end this.
Go out on applause.
Yeah, it's not gonna get better. Oh, okay. After how many epochs will you feel comfortable? Everything is fine. So like, yeah, basically, yeah, one finalized epoch. Like, yeah. So that's usually 2 by default. But if we were in like, if we were in a state where the network was unstable, it might be more than 2. And yeah, so I don't want people to use 2 as like a number, but finalization is the bar that we're looking for. Again, though, I'll emphasize this is like the very minimal bar. If things are not finalizing, that's very bad. But even if they are, if we have 80% of the network that's participating, then it still means the network is finalizing and moving along, but it means we've lost 20% of throughput. So that's still something like we're not going to call it a day at that point. We'd want to fix that, but the network would be stable.
Yeah, it's
Right,
not,
yeah,
it's not
20%
the
could
end
be
of
a
the,
broke.
it's not the end of the world if there's, if
No,
it
no,
goes
but
beyond
yeah. Yeah.
two epochs, just to set expectations for, if people are watching the stream and all of a sudden there's, another
so-
additional epoch beyond 2 or something.
No, sorry. So those are two different things. So 2 epochs should happen if we have at least 2/3 of clients updated and participating as expected. And so that's kind of the very minimal bar. It means the merge has happened and we're kind of finalizing on the network, but it could mean that we have up to 1/3 of the network that's not operating correctly. And obviously we'd want to figure out what the issue is there and fix it. So, it could be a broken client. It could be something like, some major staking provider has an issue, or like several of them have an issue. So things like that. Yeah. Okay, more questions. Okay, so yeah. So there's a question about basically block times and how it impacts protocols that might use time, that might use this to calculate annual interest rates. So the thing is, on proof of work, timestamps are very malleable. So sometimes protocols don't use the time to calculate annual interest rates. Instead, they use the number of blocks. They make an assumption about how many number of blocks there's in a year, and they kind of go from there. So if we just very naively go from 13 seconds to 12 seconds, it means there's more blocks in a single year. So if you've been using that, if you've been using that kind of proxy of a year divided by 13 seconds to count the number of blocks in the year, now you'd probably want to use 12. None of those are perfect proxies, because the 13 seconds, we have stuff like the difficulty bomb that shows up, and it's only a rough average. And then the 12 second, we have things like validators being offline, which could cause some slots to be missed. We see this less than 1% of the time right now. So, if you are using number of blocks as a proxy for time, you should double check those calculations. And the thing that's also worth noting is that post-merge, the timestamps are actually a reliable indicator of time. So the timestamps will indicate, the timestamps on the execution layer indicate kind of the start time of the slot. So if you just want to straight up use time for your calculation, you can do that in a more reliable way post-merge. Okay, and then there's an article about more details around network finalization. So, okay, any particular hack concerns closer to the merge event? So the thing with the merge is basically the execution layer itself doesn't really change much, right? There's one opcode that changes. So in terms of smart contracts being hackable, there's not really a ton that you're introducing here. It's not like we're adding some new opcodes and they can be used in a way that was previously unusable and kind of affect the outcome of transactions. And that's by design, right? You don't want the merge to require upgrades from applications. So ideally you shouldn't change the behavior on applications. So I think at that level, that's not something we're concerned about. With regards to stuff like bridges and oracles and whatnot that kind of feed in to report data back to the chain, that becomes very much an infrastructure upgrade question again, where oracles should also upgrade their nodes and they should make sure they're on the right chain. But that's something they must do every hard fork, right? Yeah. So I don't know. If somebody else has something to share there, post in the chat and we'll unmute you. But I don't think there's anything new on the smart contract hack side. Yeah, so yeah, there's a question about what happens if we don't have 2/3 and we're not finalizing. So yeah, you basically not you don't have a strong guarantee that the chain you're on won't reorg, even more so if your view of the network drops below 50%. So if you are say an exchange or something, or someone, not even just a user, who's settling an off-chain transaction, or selling a transaction which has some off-chain implications, you just can't be sure that this won't reorg. Whereas once once a block or once an epoch gets finalized, all the transactions within that epoch are basically extremely unlikely to ever be reorged. And doing so would require burning about a third of the stake at a minimum. So unless you're transacting in amounts that involve more than about 4 million ETH, the cost of reorging a finalized block is much greater than whatever you're settling. Okay, Barry, there's some people who want more clarification on shadow forks. I'll unmute you again. If there's more you want to add.
We're still digging into it, so I'm not particularly sure. So we just noticed that there were a couple of Teku blocks that had missed their proposal because they were connected to a relay and the relay was offline, but it had already accepted the bid, and that shouldn't have happened. So we're just checking as to what's happened or what the assumption is that's happened there. But we're still figuring that one out. It looks like everyone's behaving as expected though, so it could just be that the proposal was delayed or something. I can share some more info once we have it.
Anything else? Okay, last call. Okay, I think that's a good spot to wrap up then. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and yeah, see you on post-merge Ethereum in less than a week.
Thanks, everyone. MCon, we see you clapping and hear it in our heart.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. See ya.
Okay, have a good one. Cheers.